A miracle dog was solving cold cases and finding bodies for the FBI until a detective spotted its handler hiding a bone in her sock. I'm exposing the true story of how a single woman tricked an entire nation of investigators and sabotaged dozens of death cases. Stay until the end to learn where she really got the human remains. The road into the Huron National Forest was quiet in the way only places meant to hide. Things ever are, the trees standing shoulder to shoulder as if sworn to secrecy, their shadows stretching across the gravel as Sergeant Alan McGregor drove deeper, carrying with him a 21-year weight that never loosened its grip. Long before this morning, before the forest and the dog and the promise of answers, there had been a young woman named Charita Thomas, and a short walk she never finished, and an old case file that refused to stay buried no matter how many years passed or how many new crimes demanded attention. Charita Thomas had vanished in 1980, within sight of familiarity, close enough to a police station that her disappearance felt like a personal failure etched into the walls of the department. Witnesses had spoken of an older man, a car slowing, a door opening, a decision made in seconds. The name Jimmy Nelson had circled the case like a vulture ever since, always present, never landing hard enough to tear the truth open. No body, no confession, no proof that Charita Thomas was even dead. Only the gnawing certainty that she had not simply walked away from her life and never looked back. By the time Alan McGregor steered into the forest that morning, in August 2001, the case had outlived careers, marriages, and certainty itself. It had become a thing people spoke about in lowered voices, a mystery half accepted as unsolvable. And yet, McGregor believed that somewhere beneath the soil and rot and silence, the forest still remembered. He believed it so fiercely that he was willing to place his hope in an unlikely figure waiting at the edge of the trees. A dog named Eagle, panting in the dirt, tail thumping, unaware of the mythology already attached to him. Eagle did not look like legend. He was not stiff or disciplined, not sharp-eyed or imposing. He was a Doberman Pinscher mix with floppy ears and an easy demeanour, the kind of animal people knelt to pet before taking seriously. But Sandra Anderson stood beside him with the quiet confidence of someone who had watched disbelief turn into awe too many times to count. She was 40 years old, calm, self-assured, and known across law enforcement circles as the handler of the most extraordinary scent detection dog anyone had ever seen. They said Eagle could smell what bleach could not erase, what paint could not conceal, what time could not fully destroy. They said he found blood where blood should not exist anymore. They said if most cadaver dogs were exceptional, Eagle was unnatural. Alan McGregor had heard the stories, had read the reports, and as he followed Sandra Anderson into the forest, he allowed himself something he had not permitted in years: expectation. The search did not unfold the way training manuals suggested it should. Eagle did not pace methodically or circle endlessly. He moved with purpose, nose low, body loose, as if following a path only he could see. Within moments of reaching a clearing, the police had searched before, again and again, fruitlessly, Eagle stopped. He turned sharply toward a tree and began to dig. Not frantically, but with certainty. Sandra Anderson dropped to her knees, brushing aside loose earth, and what emerged was small, pale, unmistakable. A fragment of human bone. The forest did not give up its secret all at once. It scattered it. Over the course of 2 days, Eagle led investigators to piece after piece, the remains appearing in places that had been walked over countless times without result. Alan McGregor felt something crack open inside him, as each fragment was bagged and labelled. This was not imagination. This was not hope blinding him. This was real. The forest was speaking, and Eagle was translating. When the bones were sent for analysis, McGregor waited the way one waits for a verdict that could alter the meaning of decades. He imagined Charita Thomas finally being found, imagined closure, imagined Jimmy Nelson exposed at last. But when the FBI called in February 2002, the voice on the other end did not bring resolution. It brought something colder. The bones did not belong to Charita Thomas. They did not even belong to one person. They belonged to three. The revelation did not ease McGregor's obsession. It inflamed it. If the forest held three unidentified dead, then Charita Thomas might still be there too, waiting beneath layers of earth and indifference. The theory shifted in his mind, darkened. What if Jimmy Nelson was not merely a suspect in one disappearance, but a predator who had used the forest as a dumping ground? What if the case he had chased for 21 years was only a fragment of something far larger? April 17, 2002, brought another search, larger and more heavily staffed. Uniformed officers, crime lab technicians, Sandra Anderson, Eagle, and Alan McGregor returned to the same stretch of forest with renewed urgency. For hours, humans found nothing. Eagle found everything. In a dried-out stream bed, he alerted again, uncovering a knuckle bone. Another human trace pulled from the soil, like a confession, forced into the light. Then the search fractured. Voices rose. Movement caught McGregor's attention. He turned toward what sounded like a struggle, sprinting toward chaos with the instinct of a man trained to intervene. What he found was not chaos, but theatre. Sandra Anderson stood at the centre of it, frantic, shouting, accusing a crime lab technician of attacking her. The technician stood frozen, stunned, eyes fixed not on Sandra's face but on her feet. Moments earlier, unseen by most, Sandra Anderson had bent down and reached into her sock. Inside was a bone fragment. She had done this before countless times, across the country, across years. She had carried human remains against her skin, tucked into clothing, hidden in places no one thought to look. She would drop them where Eagle could find them, watching admiration ripple through law enforcement as yet another impossible discovery was credited to her miraculous dog. Eagle had never been extraordinary. He had been obedient. He had been observant. He had learned that when Sandra Anderson dropped something and reacted with excitement, he was meant to respond. The myth built itself from repetition and trust. No one wanted to believe a rescuer, a trainer, a woman who had saved a dog from euthanasia and turned him into a hero could be orchestrating one of the most audacious frauds in modern forensic history. When the illusion collapsed, it did so abruptly. Sandra Anderson's panic filled the forest as the truth spilled out under scrutiny. The human bones she had planted were stolen from medical centres, taken piece by piece over time. She had never unalived anyone, but she had desecrated the dead and poisoned investigations nationwide. 50 cases had to be re-evaluated, their foundations shaken by the realization that evidence once considered miraculous was manufactured. Alan McGregor watched the case he had believed was unravelling finally disintegrate altogether. Charita Thomas remained missing. Jimmy Nelson's conviction would later be overturned on unrelated grounds, leaving the question that haunted McGregor unchanged. The forest, once again, fell silent. Sandra Anderson pleaded guilty to multiple felonies, including falsifying evidence and obstruction of justice, and was sentenced to 21 months in prison. Eagle retired without blame, living out his days receiving treats and affection, until his death in 2003, unaware of the role he had played in one of the most unsettling betrayals of trust law enforcement had ever faced. And somewhere beneath the trees of the Huron National Forest, the truth about Charita Thomas remained untouched, unconfessed, and unforgiven. The ground holding fast to what it had swallowed, long after the people searching for answers were forced to accept that sometimes the greatest deception is not what the earth hides, but what we choose to believe when we think it has finally spoken. What do you think was Sandra Anderson's true motive? Tell me which unsolved case you think is still hidden in that forest. Drop your theory in the comments. Follow for more stories of real-life deception that changed history.